Saw this tweet yesterday from Sean McDowell, and I thought I would make a quick video by way of reply. So he highlights a question that his students are asking at Biola University. Quote, if you're not a Christian, where do you think good and bad come from if you think they exist at all? Unquote. It's interesting to me that McDowell tweets this question, and this was my response. I retweeted this tweet with commentary because I thought this is not the kind of thing I would want to highlight as a Christian university professor, as McDowell is apparently highlighting it here. Because I don't think this is a good question. I think this is indicative of a failure of a university, to be honest. So first of all, note that these students, as McDowell presents it, they're not simply asking, let's say, why do you have to be a theist in order to believe in good and evil, or that they have some sort of existence as moral value and disvalue, but you have to be a Christian. So the students, by implication, then are saying, how could you be Jewish or Muslim or a minimal theist or a deist and believe in good and evil? And my first question back is, why would you think otherwise? Why would you think you have to be a specifically Christian theist to believe in the existence of good and evil? Now, beyond that, of course, there are all sorts of different accounts of the nature of good and evil for those who are non-theists. The most robust and defensible, in my view, would be uh, um, a Platonist view of good and evil, which understands there to be a objective moral good that exists that is metaphysically distinct from the natural universe, but that is non-personal in nature. It just exists as an impersonal or platonic absolute. That's a perfectly defensible position. It's interesting to me that apparently the biology students aren't even aware of such a position. Otherwise, they wouldn't be asking a question like this. So it's not just non-Christian theists, it's also moral Platonists. The last thing I would want to point out here is it's even not just that. Put it this way, you can, actually, I'm going to stop share now because I think we've got the gist of the tweet. But you can turn this around. You could be at a secular university and talk to secular students, and they could ask, for example, well, how as a Christian could you possibly conceive of there being free will if you believe God is meticulously provident? And that's a great question, or at least it's a fair question for sure. Now, the response is there are all sorts of treatments of how to reconcile providence with free will or divine foreknowledge with free will. You may or may not find those to be adequate, but even so, most Christians are going to believe there is some kind of free will, and they will likely also believe God is, in some sense, meticulously provident, even if they don't have a way to perfectly reconcile those two things. And the same is true of other groups. So non-Christians may not have a perfectly satisfactory account for the metaphysics or the epistemology or knowledge of good and evil as value and disvalue in the universe. But that doesn't mean that they are thereby in some sort of incoherent paradox. The fact is that we all live in the world with things that we can't perfectly reconcile. And that's not to excuse uh, every kind of apparent contradiction in a belief system. It is to recognize the inherent epistemic limitations of all of us. So to conclude, again, I think I have a threefold response to McDowell's tweet here. The first is that it's because well, it's one thing to think that you have to be a theist in order to have an understanding of objective good, but to be a Christian theist is a very bizarre thing to my mind. And yet that's what McDowell presents here as a widespread view among his students. You have to be a Christian theist to have a conception of good and evil, or to have a metaphysical grounding for good and evil. Next thing again is you don't even have to be a theist. You could certainly be a metaphysical naturalist, for example. And it's concerning to me that that is not apparently an option even considered among the students McDowell references. And finally, we all have paradoxes, questions, gaps in our understanding. It doesn't mean that we can't consistently affirm both, let's say, free will and divine providence, or good and evil, even absent a satisfactory explanation of their metaphysical grounding or our knowledge of them. And so that's my quick response to McDowell's tweet.